All right. Hi, Treehousers. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, depending on where you are joining us from. Just check and make sure my sound is going. Cool. Okay. Um, so I hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to our home automation app that we've been working on for quite a while now. So today we're going to look at, I'm just going to kind of describe the quick fix that I figured out from our SQLite problem um, last time. So if you have been keeping up, you'll know what I mean. If you haven't been keeping up, just a heads up, just a warning. You're more than welcome to hang out with us as I go through the next steps in our project here. But this is kind of a series. It's kind of part of a from beginning to end project that we've been working on. So if you would like to start at the beginning, all of our live streams are saved on our YouTube channel, so you can go check it out there. But feel free to hang out, ask any questions that you want. Karen is our awesome chat moderator today, so she's hanging out in chat. She'll pass me any questions that y'all have. And otherwise, I'll give a quick recap. We've been building a little home automation app. It's going to be only one size, so we're not doing anything, responsive. It's just going to be like the size of like an iPad. Sorry, I have like a dog hair and I can feel it. It's one of those where you can feel it, but you can't. Got it. Where it's like you can't see it, but you know it's there. Oh, it's like the most maddening sometimes. Anyways, we're working on a home automation app. So far, we've done a lot of the back end work in Python. We created a weather connection to a weather API. We created a Google Calendar connection to a Google Calendar of mine. And then we also created a grocery and to-do list that create a little database that holds our to-dos and our grocery items. So today we are going to, I'm going to show you the fix for the SQLite issue. Two, we're going to add Flask. Flask is going to be how we connect our backend to the front end so that we can actually see our changes. And then we're going to we're going to use Bootstrap, which we'll get into that a little bit later. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. And we're going to use that for our HTML, and I'll talk about that more when we get there. So that's the agenda, I guess, for today. So stick around, hang out, and let's jump into it. So the first thing is our SQLite issue. So what I realized I did need to do is download SQLite. So this is not the best looking website, but it's SQLite.org and it's /download.html. So if you are following along, this is the download you will need to do on your local computer if you want to check out, dig into the SQLite database. So I downloaded down here for Windows, and I did the 64 because I believe that's the one that works for my computer. But choose, 32 or 64-bit, whichever works for your computer. So you download it, you unzip it, and you save it on your computer in a file called SQLite. And then you have to make sure to add that to path on Windows, which can get very complicated, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But if you Google add to path on Windows, you'll find tons of directions. And so essentially it's within your system. You add the system environment variables, and this will walk you through, and you can do, add a new one. And then for me, I just did browse, and I found that SQLite folder. I saved everything I downloaded into, and then just browse till you find the folder, and then you hit OK, and it saves it for you. It's actually pretty quick and pretty easy to do. Then to make sure it changes, if you have a terminal open, you will have to restart it or close it and open it again, so that'll work. So to prove that it's working, I'm going to open up, I think, our grocery list. So if I do SQLite SQLite3.exe, which I have to do that on Windows. I believe on Mac it's just SQLite 3, but on Windows you have to do .exe. Cool. Oh, actually, I think I need SQLite3.exe. I believe I have to do my glist.db here. So I'm trying to open up my glist database. There we go. Okay. So you can see I'm in the SQLite shell, which is a good sign, because last time, anytime we ran any commands like this, it was like, command not found, command not found. So it's working. But if you do want to dig into it just to prove that, you know, your items are getting added to your database, you do .tables, and that'll just put glist, and then this is where you write your SQL code. So I'm just going to do select star, space star, which is select all or everything from glist, which is the name of my table. And then you do need to remember that colon. If you forget it, it'll do this, and it's just like waiting for more, because you have to have the colon so that it knows your expression or your search kind of SQL term is complete. So if you forget, which I forget all the time because now that I'm with Python, you pretty much never use colons. And so it's very easy to forget to put the colon in there. So just in case, if you do see it and it pops up like this, where you're like, ... what? Like, what are you trying to get me to do next? You probably just forgot your colon. So just add your colon and hit enter, and it'll show you all of the items currently in the database, which we only added one for testing purposes. So it automatically numbers it. The item was called peanut butter, and the description was a large one for Jethro's treats for my dog. And then .exit to close out. And that's SQLite. So I wrote myself a note so I wouldn't forget to go through that. But it is working. So thank you to everyone last time who was trying to help out in chat. Sometimes I know it's kind of hard because of the time difference between when I'm talking and when you actually like hear me talking. There's a little bit of a time difference there, and so sometimes it can be hard. But I really appreciate everyone who jumped into chat or comments to post up some help. It's very nice. Okay, that's done. Now we're going to work on adding Flask. So the first thing we need to do is to install it so that it's in our pip file. So that's going to be, and remember we've been using, because it says pip file, that means we're using pip environment to install our items. That's what we're using for this project. You can also use virtual environment, and there's other ones too. We're going to use pip environment install Flask. And it could take a second, so let's get it running. And we'll just hang out here and stare into each other's eyes. How are you doing? Sounds good. But joking aside, Flask will connect our back end to our front end. So we're going to do a little bit of front end setup today. It's kind of the process I like to go through. I like to kind of add the shell, or kind of like our wireframe in HTML. And then I kind of finish up the final touches on our back-end side, and then we go full hardcore front end, and we finish off with, you know, the CSS and everything. Is this Node? No, we're doing this in Python. So this is all Python backend. And then the front end, we're using a Flask connection to connect to our HTML and CSS, which we're going to start with our HTML today. So done. That's done downloading. We can check our pip file. See, it says Flask. The star always means any version, which for just playing around with right now, totally fine. but when doing production ready code, you probably want to have this set as a certain version of Flask. That way, if Flask updates, it doesn't automatically take the updated version of Flask, which could break your program. So, but for what we're playing around with right now, they're all set as any version, and that's totally fine. What is Flask? Flask is kind of like Express for those that use Node and do backend with JavaScript. So Flask is our framework for connecting our Python backend to our front end. So it works very similarly to Express. So I'm just guessing this might be the person who's also asking about Node, so I'm assuming that you might be familiar with Express. So if you are, it's kind of like one of Python's versions of Express, which is Flask. The other big name one for Python is Django. So those are kind of the big names on the Python side of things. But I know on the Node side of things, it's usually using Express is what you use to do your connections. So if you all are following along, you can download the code. By the way, did anyone notice that GitHub changed the design of their web page? If you haven't been on it in a while, go check it out. They did a little redesign. Just a little side note. But you can download the project and code along with me if you would like. But I already added in all of our imports so that it's just ready to go. So from Flask, we're going to need Flask. Render template allows us to render our HTML template so that we can see it. Redirect, just exactly like it sounds, allows you, oops, I hit my thing, allows you to redirect someone on a web page, on a website. URL 4 we will get into a little bit, but it just kind of is a Flask specific way to say the URL. And then, of course, request, which is requesting things on websites and web pages. But this will be all specific to Flask. And then I went ahead and imported all of our little kind of mini Python apps that we've been working on in the past few weeks. We won't be adding them today, but just so that they're already there. So we need to create our Flask app and get it running so that we can start looking at our front end and kind of wireframe out our HTML side of things. This also means that probably next time that we're together, we'll jump into doing some forms and how posting a form ends up, sending the information to our databases and things like that. Because we have 2 forms that we'll have, one for the grocery list and one for to do. So we won't get to that today. We'll just get to wireframing it today. And then we'll get to doing the connections back and forth. So the first thing we need to do is create our app. And it's going to just be called app. That's what we're going to name it. And we're going to call Flask. And in here, we're going to put dunder name. And then we're going to come down and we're going to add our first root. So if you are familiar with Express, this is how rooting is done in Flask. So in Flask, we do @app. And if you're wondering what I'm looking at my finished code so I don't forget something. So app.root. And this is going to be our home root. So we just do a slash. I'm not going to dab. Sorry. Not going to catch me in a dab. And we're going to call it, of course, index, because that's traditionally what the home root is called, is index. Index.html is the traditional homepage HTML file name. So just sticking with those patterns, because then when somebody else reads the code, it makes it a lot easier for them to make those connections. So we have our index. It's not going to take anything. And we're just going to return our render template, which is going to be our, you guessed it, index.html. So that's it. That's adding your home root. Done. So the last thing we're going to do, oops, I lost my mouse. There it is. A space down here a little bit. Let me get a little extra. And we're going to put in a dunder main. So if dunder name equals dunder main. And for anyone that hasn't been following along, or if you're not familiar with Python, dunder main is a way to make sure that whatever is inside of this if statement only runs if I run app.py, this file itself. So if I were to import app.py into anywhere else, none of this stuff in this if statement would ever allows you to, for in some instances, we've been using it like, let me scroll to the bottom of weather. In our little weather app over here, we've been using to test and make sure that the weather app is working. So we're going to put in here, because this is essentially, we'll always be running app.py. This is our start file for our program. So we're going to run app, which is calling our Flask app up here. So app.run. And we're going to put it on debug equals true. And we're going to put it on a host equals, I always got to remember how many zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our host and our port. 8,000. Cool. Nope. Wrong button. There we go. All right, so that is the entire connection of our Flask app. So if I do pip environment run app.py, cool, allow access, you can see it automatically pops up the URL here in your terminal. So it tells you have to put Control-C to quit, which will close, because currently it's a live running, well, not live, it's live on only my machine running. But if I do Control-click, open, and you can see it's saying that it can't be reached, and that's okay, because we have no index.html file. So this template that it's trying to render has nothing to grab because it doesn't exist yet. So let's add it. Oh, let me check something. Oh, back with no sound. Oh, everything's working on my end. Seems like we're having a bit of some technical trouble, so give me just a second. Okay, so if sound is working for you, if y'all wouldn't mind, can you post up like a thumbs up or sounds okay or something in the chat? Because we did have someone end up with some sound issues, so I just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself for the next, 30 minutes. So it wouldn't be quite as fun of a live stream if it's just me miming what's going on. All set. Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone, for doing that for me. So we're going to add our HTML. So with Flask, it's automatically going to try and find a folder called templates. So let's give it to it. So we're going to add a new folder called templates. And then inside of templates is where we're going to put our index.html file. New file, index.html. Cool. Okay, that's fine. So I have installed a HTML boilerplate plugin for VS Code. So I can type in HTML and I just come down here to HTML5 boilerplate and voila, it's all in here. Though I have been noticing it's been forgetting that HTML. It has these if statements. I'm just going to delete them for now. Feel free to check it out on your own if you would like to. But we don't really need it for our purposes. I'm just going to add an H1 that says, hello world, as every good programmer does, the first thing they print out is always hello world. So I'm going to save that out. And I am going to Control C to quit our site. I'm going to run it again just by typing up and then hitting enter. See if we can get it going. It's not wanting to connect. Let's see what we're doing. That's a bummer. Of course, I do everything and it works just fine, and then I start typing on a different computer and it's not wanting to go. But it seems like trusted domains. Let's try typing in a slash and see if it goes. Interesting. It's not wanting to connect to it. Let me just check my code is matching up the same. It's always a bummer when you get app.run, debug equals true, host equals 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Port equals 8,000. Okay, so that's all the same. And we have our correct, make sure I didn't forget any commas or quotation marks. Template, your template. Put my files out. Okay. Try doing this is missing. Already has that at the bottom. So just in case, I did notice it was missing. It has HTML at the bottom, but it didn't have it at the top. Shouldn't be what's happening. I'm gonna add in our title too. Home. Did I hit caps? I did hit caps. Automation app. Okay, so it's telling me, I can tell because whenever I save my index file, I should be seeing things happen. So it's not connecting to it. Try doing, whoops, app.py, just in case. Do a good old 3000. Okay, so you can see it updated. So when I did a change, it did update. But it's not wanting to go. That's odd. Like every time lately, I come out to hang out with you all and then we run into some troubles. Let me try commenting this out for a second. Okay, so now do our configure trusted domains again. Okay, so it's trusted. Okay. Starting. Darn. That's going to make seeing the HTML a little bit harder. Let me change this back out to 8,000 and get our restarting. Now, one thing that is catching my debugging mind is that it might not like that I put templates in afterwards. It should still be able to find it, but I did put these templates in after I did my app, but but I have since stopped it and rerun it, so that shouldn't be our issue either. So we'll do this live. Not sure if it's a VS, it shouldn't be a VS Code thing. It should be Flask. Flask, not being HTML. Directly to views or public. Okay, so it automatically does find templates, so that was right. Otherwise, you have to pass in a specific argument that says where it is. And we already have debug equals true to post the error messages, but it looks like we're not even getting the Flask connection, which is going to bug me. Debug equals true, Flask, turn hello world. Oh, it could be that it has old processes running. That's another thing to check. Okay. So let's try just returning like this person is a hello world. So we'll comment out this. Do return hello world. Should restart. Yeah, so it's not even finding my website link at all. This is annoying. Should be able to pop up. Try different ports. It's not our port. I have a feeling it has to do with putting this in as a trusted domain. So let me try closing this out, and I'm actually going to close Visual Studio. Ah, okay. So there was something still running in the background because it took it a second there. Okay. Or it just wanted to update real fast. So let's try. Make sure we still have our shell. Yeah, it looks like it was trying to update possibly shell. One thing subshell. Okay, pip environment run app.py. Ooh, now it's working real slow. Okay. Darn. The address invalid. Let's try that. Flask. Okay, so this looks like what we were doing. One IP address. Okay, let's try doing our, oops. Looks like for some people it's the IP address is what's causing it to go. there it goes. That's super weird. Okay, well, thanks for bugging it out with me. And you can see some real live debugging. Okay, so we had to change the IP address. So super weird. Actually, let me Control Shift T. Okay. So I will share this Stack Overflow. I have a different computer up that I'm messaging with Karen on, who's in chat with y'all. But that way, if any of you want to read more into why the answer is to use a different IP address, you can pop in there. But there we go. Now we have a hello world, and my heart can go back to beating normally, because nothing's more stressful than running into errors when you're live on air. So now let's try connecting to our HTML template. We should just be able to refresh if it's connected. Yay! If you're not celebrating in chat, you should. Nothing makes you feel better than having the extreme stress of finding a bug when everything else has been working perfectly and then figuring it out and having it work. So that roller coaster is what it's all about when you're being a programmer. Okay, now we can jump into the Bootstrap HTML. So Bootstrap HTML, we need to connect Bootstrap to our project. So if you go to if you Google Bootstrap, it'll usually bring you to this page. This is their homepage. The website is getbootstrap.com. If you're not familiar with it, it is a HTML and CSS and JavaScript, essentially entire front end, like pre-built kind of template. And some of you may be, but Megan, why not just do it all yourself and code all this stuff, do the HTML and CSS, and if I had time, I totally would. But a lot of companies and a lot of people with their own projects, time becomes an issue. So knowing how to build on your own is super important, but also knowing how to incorporate different, plugins and templating tools and toolkits and things like that can really help you to speed up your development process. And a lot of companies use things like that because it does speed up their process so quickly. So that's essentially why we're going to use Bootstrap, because it's going to make doing all the stuff we need to do in HTML and CSS so much faster. So we're going to head over to documentation, and you can see it has quick start right here where we have some copy pasting to do. So it tells you exactly where to put it up here. So we have some CSS we need to copy over into our index. I'm going to put it before. This would be this kind of a placeholder that the boilerplate gives us for our own CSS, which we will do another time. So I'm going to add this before. It's a really long name. And don't forget, I'm adding it before because in CSS, it is cascading. So whatever information comes last, that's what it's going to go off of. So we want our personal styles to be at the bottom. So CSS is over. We have some JavaScript to put in. And it tells you right here, you want to put it right before the closing body tag. So we're going to copy. And we're going to put it, it'll do a little space right before our closing body tag. And same thing, they have sometimes when you copy over more than one line, oops, click here, thank you. It doesn't always tab it to the right position. So same thing, it gave us our own JavaScript at the bottom, so I'm going to leave it there. I am going to add in a comment, and if you haven't been commenting your HTML code, because I know a lot of people comment out their code, their JavaScript, their Python, what have you. I also like to add comments to my HTML, because sometimes your index or whatever page can get super long with HTML, and it just makes it that much easier to tell the differences in different, different blocks, where things begin and end and things like that. So this is all of our, so I'm going to call this our Bootstrap JS because that's what it is. Come down here, and this is just going to call it OG JavaScript. That's going to be my original created JavaScript. So I'm going to do the same thing up here. This will be my CSS. I'm going to copy our Bootstrap. And I'm going to cough real quick. Give me just a second. Ooh, okay. This one. And our CSS for Bootstrap. Save it. And now, if we come over here, we really shouldn't. The only change you can tell that it's connected is it changed the base font. So when you connect Bootstrap, my mind is like, I'm still stressed about the bug, and so now I'm trying to like bring it back down to normal level. The base font when you're connecting your Bootstrap to your index or to your HTML is this sans serif, which means it doesn't have like those little lines at the top and bottom of letters. So you can see, hopefully you caught that little change. So our Bootstrap is connected. So we are going to start adding, and let me bring up our design. Fine. This big. Like I forgot a line. I was using lines to help me figure out the spacing in between things. So this again is our design, just so everyone, in case you haven't been with us, this is what it's going to look like at the end. So these in Bootstrap are called cards, so we can grab cards. They also have list elements, and we're going to be using Bootstrap's grid. So it has a grid that's already built in. So we're actually going to come over here to layout on the left side, and it's going to show you overview, and we're going to jump right to grid. So grid is essentially telling you that you can split your work up into columns, and if you saw when we were designing, on here and I do layout, we used columns when we were designing as well. So this is a 12 column layout. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4 for this. We had a spacer, and then the rest of the content was on these other 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 7. Yes. Wow. Cannot add or really use my brain anymore. That's what happens. So we're going to be using the this layout. So to start our wireframing, I know that at the top of our design, we're essentially going to have 2 columns, right? We have this that's going to be centered, so we need to add that for our today's date. And then we have 2 items, 2 sections, not really 2 items, because it's more like 1, 2, 3, 4. But it's 2 sections, our weather section and then our event section. So let's break those out into our code. So you can see you have to have a class container and then a row and then your columns. So easy thing in Bootstrap. Wow, I'm really losing it now. The easy thing in Bootstrap in their documentation is everything has a copy to clipboard, which is fabulous. It makes it so easy to implement their system. So I'm going to copy that over, remove our hello world, I'm going to paste what they got, and you can see it's red because it doesn't always paste right. So this div there, that one is there, and then they don't always tab out to the correct place. I gotta do a little, there's a space in there, a little adjusting. There we go. All the reds are gone. That means it's good to go. I refresh, 1, 2, 3 columns. So it's as easy as that to play around with Bootstrap. So feel free, if you want to just like pause me here and just go play around with Bootstrap, please do. It's a lot of fun to play around with it. And we have some great content with Bootstrap as well. So for our header, we're going to need just one column. So I'm going to delete out one, and I don't need the small that just says the size of the columns, but since we're only having one column all the way across, we don't really need it. Okay, so this is going to be our date. So today's date, how did I have it in our design? Thursday, April 9th. So today is Monday, July 20th. Oh, that's right, because it's my anniversary. Don't worry, I did remember earlier in the day. It wasn't like I forgot and I just remembered right now. So refresh, and you can see it puts it kind of over here to the side. And if you right click on it, you can come down here to inspect, and it'll pull up what this looks like. And so if you hover over the different elements, it kind of shows you where it exists on the page. So this column has some buffer room on each side, which is totally fine because in our design, if I turn our grid back on, you can see we have the same buffer space, and that's pretty typical because if you think about like an iPad or a phone, you know, you're usually holding it. I was gonna say I have mine. Usually holding it, and so your thumb kind of covers up that side of the screen. So you never want to put content where people's, you know, thumbs are going to cover it. And same thing if you think about like scrolling on phones, it gets a little hard. You want a little bit of buffer space, but you also want to have enough room that it's not like text like this, you know, when someone's reading a blog post. But it's always good to have a little bit of space on each side of the screen, give you a little bit of buffer. So that's already built in, and you can probably guess we need that text to be in the center of the page, and we also need it to be our top header. If we look at our design, this is like an H1. So I change this to H1, and then just cut and paste. And then you can always, it's always good to check your changes. It's a lot bigger. It's an H1, so you can see the difference. I don't necessarily check after each small change, but as you start to code, as you're beginning coding, I highly suggest that you do little pieces, check your code, little pieces, check your code, because it can be really easy to get excited and just start typing away, and then all of a sudden you can't figure out where this bug is occurring because you just wrote code for the last 20 minutes. So my suggestion, do little pieces at a time, and then the more you get used to programming, the more you get used to your style of code, that process gets a lot easier. So let's jump back into our documentation because we know it's not centered, right? The column itself is centered on the screen, but the text is not, and we do want the text centered. Is that the Chrome browser? Yes, I am in Chrome. I don't know if it shows. There's a little guy down here, but it puts my face over it a little bit. So let's go into our grid here, our Bootstrap documentation. I'm going to scroll down. It gets into quite a bit of stuff. And so it does have some alignment built into your columns, which we will probably get later. But you can vertical align it. And then you can also align the content within in the center. So I believe this will do what I like, but I believe the text will still be on the side. So I don't think that's going to quite do it for me. We'll see if we can see a difference. May not give us a difference because we don't really have a big space for our columns, so it's probably not going to do much for us. Yeah, but we can do, and here if I do our text align center, that centers it right away. So that's something we'll just have to add into the CSS when we get into working with that. So the first part done. Now we need this section. So again, it's 2 sections, and then this section has its own 2 columns, and this section has its own 2 columns, because we're always only going to have 2 events, because we'd run out of space if we try to do any more. So we need another row. So we're going to do another container underneath. So div, and we need to add a class. And you don't have to copy everything because you're pulling from their CSS. You can just use their class names, and it will do exactly what you want it to do. So we want container, and then inside of this div, we're going to have another one, and that's going to be class row. And then inside of this row, we're going to have 2 columns. And then inside of those columns, we're going to add the additional columns. Sorry, let's go back to our design. So we're going to add this column and this column. And then we're going to use a specific thing with Bootstrap, which allows you to say how wide or big you want the columns to be. So we need another div, and it just keeps following the same pattern with what we're doing today. So class is column. Oops, I accidentally hit caps lock. Column. And then Control C, Control V. And then inside of here, I'm just going to put a paragraph tag right now. I'm just going to type weather, so we know that that one's going to be weather. And we're going to put events, because we know that one's going to be events. So come back over here, refresh. We have our weather and events. And if we look at, we can see our next container, our next row. And if I look at each column, you can see they're equally split across the page, right? They're 50-50 of this entire row. And in our design, that's not quite what it is. It's more like, not like 60-40, you know. The events side has a little bit more space than the weather side, just because the content on this side is larger. So we need to reflect that in our design. I'm just going to scroll through so I make sure I know what I did. Okay. So if we look at our grid, like I said before, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we kind of have this buffer of 5, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we have 5 and 7 for our columns. And in Bootstrap, oops, you can use numbers. See if it has it in another spot. Content width. Okay, so it doesn't give you a specific name to it. But you can see they have like 2, 2. That one's auto. This one they have 8 and 4. So this one's 8 columns, and this one's only 4 to make 12. 12 is kind of the typical grid size. It's a 12-column grid. So you can see you just do column, dash, and then the size. And I'm about to sneeze, sorry. Okay, so in our design, we said we had 5 and 7, so let's reflect that here. So column dash 5 and column dash 7, and save. And let's come back to our app, refresh, and you can see the events jumped over a little bit. And if we look at, oops, wrong one, it keeps opening that one. We look at our row, and if we look at our columns, you can see that 5 is smaller than 7. So you can see the difference. It used to be 50-50, and now it's no longer 50-50. So we have that set up now. I know we're getting close to the end. It's a bummer that we ran into that bug so that we can get so much of this done, but we'll try and add our 2 columns here and 2 cards. So the cards are a little bit easier, so let's do those first. So instead of events, we're going to have a row with each thing with an equal column. So we need another div. Let me make sure that's what I did. Yes, I did. So we're going to add a div, give it a space, class of container. And inside of here, we're going to have a div with a class row. And you can probably see the pattern that I'm repeating. And then we are going to put in our 2 cards. So let's go to our grid system, and this is where we're going to go to, is it content or components? It's components. We're going to go to components, and you can see Bootstrap has all of these already pre-made components for you. There's one named card, that's one we want. And I am going to zoom in a bit here. Just realized that's probably been really tiny for all of you. So if it's ever super tiny, just please let us know in chat and we can adjust. So here's one example where it has a picture and then card title, some text, and a button. And so you can kind of scroll through. Here's one where it's just text. Here's title, subtitle, text, couple links. So it's pretty variable. You can kind of pick and choose and you can mix and match. There's list groups. There's this one's called the kitchen sink. It's got everything in it. There's one where it's kind of got this little like header and some information. Use it for quotes. Centered. Got some sizing. Got your text alignment. You can add navigation to it. And image. So you can have image on top, image on bottom. And then you can change the color to match what you need it to match. So what we're going to do, let me scroll back up, is we're going to use a traditional card. Come up here to, definitely don't want the kitchen sink. Sorry for all the scrolling because I know sometimes it can be annoying. We'll use our, wow, my mind is blanking. Our image one here. And I copy it and we're going to paste it. And of course you can see it doesn't always paste beautifully. So we have, this needs to be tabbed out. And just to make sure it's popping up and refresh, and we see our card image. And that's just an image placeholder because we don't have an actual image for it to pull from. Yeah, okay. So we will need 2 cards. So go 1 and paste. Quick thing, we need our column. So I removed what we just added so that I can add class column. And then inside of here, I'm going to paste back in our card. And luckily it saved our thing. And essentially we need the exact same thing. So now we can just copy, paste, and now we have 2 columns with 2 cards. And it's going to stack them for right now. So we have our cards. We need to add the same thing for weather, where we add a couple columns as well. So we need our div class container and div class row. Our div class column. And in here, I'm just going to do a paragraph tag. I'm just going to put the sun and then what did we have for the other ones? It was like 80% chance for rain and something like 12 miles per hour for the wind, I think is what we had for one column. And then the second column, so div class column, we had the different days of the week. So we had today, we had tomorrow, and then the day after that. So just doing text right now, we'll add the different things after that. So we have 1, 2, and then those are stacking for right now, but we can use CSS so that they unstack, so that they're not stacked anymore. So we got the kind of the wireframe done for this top section. We'll need to add the wireframe for the bottom section. Sounds like we're going to have to do that next time because we're almost out of time. So next time we'll add the wireframe for our 2 lists. This one will have check boxes, this one will not, and then we have 2 buttons at the bottom, which will pull up a modal. If you're not familiar with what a modal is, you can check out the components in Bootstrap and go down to modal, and it'll give you some examples. So this is an example of what it looks like, and here's a demo. So it's those kind of pop-ups, but it's not the Chrome pop-up. It's a pop-up that's specific to your own website. So this is what we're going to use for our 2 forms. We're going to have the form inside of this modal. So when you click the plus button, it'll pop up that modal, and it'll have a form for adding a grocery item. And this one will pop up a form for adding a to-do item to your to-do list. So we will need to create the HTML for that next time, and then we will work on connecting the forms so that they're doing what we want them to do, which is to add stuff to our database and then refresh our homepage so that it reflects that something has been added to our list. So we have today attached our added Flask to our app so that we can connect our backend to our front end. We've added our index.html template, and we have started to wireframe out our HTML for all of the items that we're going to need on our front end. And some of you might be saying, well, hey, when you have your list items, these things are going to be coming from the database because you're going to be adding items to your list. So for right now, we're going to build out a list just so we can see how it looks. And then we will build out with the HTML. And then when we connect our forms and everything, we'll make sure that when something gets submitted, it gets added to our template. So that'll be getting into some more Flask stuff and being specific about, when things get submitted, how does Flask render our template now with the new information in it. So a lot of information, a lot of stuff that we did today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you stuck with it, especially through our little hiccup. That's programming, that's life. There's ups and downs, but figuring out those problems are part of what makes this all fun. So that's about it for me today. If you haven't yet, we have, I think it's next week, we have our Treehouse conference completely online. So it's free to attend. Check out any of our socials, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff, and you'll find a link to sign up for our conference. There's going to be some amazing talks there. I'm going to be hanging out listening when I can, and so I'll be there. You can say hi to me in the chat. But we're all really excited about it. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. If you haven't signed up, go sign up today so that you can save your spot. Like I said, it is free. We just have registration to make sure that we can email you out when everything's going live and resources and all sorts of stuff, I'm sure. But anyways, I hope you all had fun hanging out with me today. Stay safe out there. Keep hanging in there. And I'll be back next month as we continue our home automation app with hopefully no bugs next time. But, anyways, see you all later. Have a great rest of your day or night, depending on where you are. Bye, everyone.